Have you ever stopped to wonder why some women choose to live alone? No boyfriend, no partner, not even appearing to be searching for one. It's not because they're lonely, heartbroken, or lacking options. The truth is far more complex, more unsettling. It challenges everything we've been taught about what a woman should want. Because when a woman chooses solitude, she's not getting lost. She's finding herself. And that kind of self-discovery doesn't come with applause, attention, or constant company. It comes with silence, with strength, with a freedom most still can't fully understand. She isn't lonely. She's discerning. She isn't cold. She's simply done setting herself on fire to keep others warm. There's something deeply unsettling to the world about a woman who doesn't need a relationship to feel whole. It disrupts the logic of control. It breaks the myth that women are emotionally dependent, and it exposes an uncomfortable truth. Many men don't know what to do with a woman who doesn't need saving, and many women are still learning to recognize that power within themselves. Carl Jung once said that what we repress becomes our shadow. These single women are not symbols of lack. They are mirrors of suppressed strength. They are what many long to be but few dare to become. They don't beg for love. They quietly choose. They don't seek attention. They protect their energy. They aren't chasing fairy tales. They're prioritizing peace. And that alone is enough to make people uncomfortable. In a world that pushes urgency to pair up, to settle down, these women have discovered the quiet power of simply being with themselves. A woman living without a partner isn't adrift. She's rising. She's moving at a frequency where nothing is begged for. It's earned, where approval isn't sought. Presence speaks louder. And maybe that's why she draws so much criticism, why people rush to label her, question her, explain her away, because behind her perceived absence lies a presence. Unshakable, unapologetic, complete. She's not waiting for any kind of love. She's holding space for one that doesn't ask her to shrink. And until it finds her, she stands firm, whole enough. You might not understand it. You might see it as pride, stubbornness, or unresolved hurt. But deep down, somewhere quiet within, you know there's a question forming, a whisper. And it's asking, what if she's not the one missing something? What if she's simply found something we're all still searching for? It's that quiet question, barely audible, yet persistent, that lingers in the background even when you try to silence it. What if the path that looks lonely is the only one that leads to the deepest kind of love? The kind that begins with you. The silence surrounding a woman who lives alone isn't emptiness. It's sanctuary. And those who fail to understand the worth of that sacred space are quick to label her cold, distant, arrogant. But what most don't see is that she didn't build her solitude to shut the world out. She built it to avoid losing herself in it. Carl Jung also said that everything we refuse to confront in ourselves, we end up projecting onto others. And maybe that's why so many confuse solitude with absence, when in truth, it can be the richest soil for self-discovery. While others chase connection to feel whole, she turned inward. In the vast silence of her own being, she faced the shadows she had long avoided. Old wounds from childhood, unspoken rejections, attachments dressed up as love. Her decision to be alone didn't come from a fresh wound. It came from a healed one. She didn't stop believing in love. She simply stopped accepting versions of it that made her feel small. She knows chaos. She's loved so hard she lost herself. She's given too much. She's begged for crumbs that should never have been offered at all. But something shifted. Her awakening wasn't a lightning strike. It was a slow unfolding. A quiet series of disappointments that eventually stopped hurting and started teaching. What you see now isn't coldness. It's emotional clarity. And that clarity, that maturity is intimidating because it asks for something real, presence, depth, truth. She doesn't seek just any kind of company. She seeks reciprocity. She's not enchanted by empty promises anymore. She's drawn to real presence. So yes, maybe she seems unreachable, not because she's built walls, but because she's learned the difference between being saved and being seen. And to truly see her, that requires more than charm, more than sweet words. It takes the courage to meet her where she truly lives, beneath the surface, beyond the noise. That's where many walk away. Not because she's too much, but because she's enough. And when a woman becomes enough, when she becomes whole, she awakens two responses in the world: admiration and fear. Admiration from those also on the path to wholeness, and fear from those still waiting for someone else to make them feel complete. She doesn't want to complete anyone. She wants to overflow beside someone who's already found themselves too. Until then, she remains alone, not by chance or misfortune, but out of unwavering loyalty to her own soul. This woman isn't hiding. She's protecting something sacred. There's a vast difference between isolation and preservation, though the world rarely sees it. We live in a culture that still romanticizes the idea of happily ever after as something that only comes in pairs. A world that mistrusts the woman who walks alone, as if solitude must be a sign of something broken. But as Carl Jung once said, where convention rules, there is little room for authenticity. And she doesn't live by convention. She lives by essence. She hears the same tired lines. You're too picky. You should be more open. Nobody's perfect. And she smiles calmly, knowingly. Because what others call picky is simply the bare minimum, the baseline she took years to realize she's worthy of. She's not chasing perfection. She's seeking someone whole, someone who has done the inner work, who can love without breaking, who can stand beside her without needing her to shrink. That's rare. And she knows it doesn't just appear on every corner. The discomfort she brings isn't in her words. It's in her existence. She's proof that joy, strength, and fulfillment don't require a partner. And that shakes the foundations. Men who rely on female insecurity feel threatened. Women still entangled in the need for approval may feel judged. But she's not here to fight anyone. She's simply being, and there is nothing more confronting than someone who is free. Her presence alone is a mirror, reflecting back everything others are still running from. She's not in a rush. She honors her own pace. And that unsettles a world addicted to speed and instant gratification. She seeks depth, while society chases distraction. She values presence, while most offer shallow availability. She yearns for soul-deep connection, while others curate highlight reels for fleeting attention. So when she says no, it's not a game, it's her truth. When she walks away, it's not drama, it's self-preservation. When she stays in rather than entertaining emptiness, it's not arrogance, it's clarity. And that clarity, forged through pain, solitude, and radical self-honesty, is her quiet revolution. She doesn't live to please, she lives to be. And that simple act, being, makes her dangerous to a system built on conformity and need. Perhaps what unsettles people most isn't her solitude at all. It's the peace she's found within it. Carl Jung said, "Those who look outside dream, those who look inside awaken." And she chose the path inward. It wasn't glamorous. It was raw, painful, a stripping away of everything false, a reckoning with emotional dependency, a slow, deliberate reconstruction, piece by piece. Now she no longer defines herself through anyone else's eyes. She sees herself clearly, fully, truthfully. And that changes everything. So ask yourself, how many times have you wondered, is being alone a failure, or a kind of freedom? Have you ever felt the need to explain yourself, just because you're not in a relationship? She had. She once believed something was wrong with her, in a world that glorifies couples, even the unhappy ones. But one day, something shifted. She realized it's better to be alone than to feel invisible next to someone. And on that day, she made a quiet, powerful pact with herself. Never again would she settle for less than what she truly deserves. Her path hasn't been linear. There are still days of doubt, moments of nostalgia, nights wrapped in silence. But through it all, a quiet strength grows with every choice made in self-awareness. She's learned that real love doesn't trap. It doesn't consume. It doesn't manipulate. The love she longs for is the kind that liberates, uplifts, supports without suffocating. And until that love arrives, she chooses to keep evolving on her own. Not out of pride, but out of integrity. This woman is the living embodiment of what Carl Jung called individuation. She's faced her shadows, descended into the depths of her unconscious, broken open, and returned more whole than she ever imagined. Now that she knows who she is, she refuses to be half of anything again. She doesn't seek someone to complete her. She seeks someone to meet her in her awareness. And yes, that's intimidating, because it requires emotional maturity. And the truth is, very few are ready to love that responsibly. Most still love from lack, from fear, from possession. So if she walks alone today, it's not out of bitterness. It's because every step she takes is shaped by what she's learned. Every no she gives is an act of self-respect. Every absence she chooses is a declaration that love should never be begged for. She no longer needs to prove her worth. And that kind of certainty, rooted deep in the soul, changes everything. Because a woman who has found herself is dangerous. Not because she's armed, but because she's clear. The woman who lives alone now is not the same woman who once pleaded to be loved. Something in her broke, but it was that very break that set her free. Sometimes the soul only finds its true shape after it's shattered. Carl Jung once said, "The tree that reaches to heaven must have roots that reach to hell." And that's exactly what she's lived. She descended into the hell of her own story, faced ancestral wounds, inherited pain, traumas not just her own, but passed down through generations of women before her. She broke the cycle. She said no to every relationship that echoed the same toxic script. She learned the hard way. It's not her job to fix, to save, or to settle for scraps out of fear of being alone. And when she stopped accepting less, the world tried to convince her she was wrong. But she stood firm, at first uncertain, then aware, and finally untouchable. Because once you've faced the abyss of your own soul, you no longer fear absence. You learn to feed yourself with silence, to warm your spirit with your own presence. She isn't unreachable. She just no longer allows herself to be trespassed. There's a vast difference between opening your heart and letting yourself be torn apart. Yes, she opens, but only to those who come in truth, not with charm, not with empty promises. She's seen too much to fall for performance, disguised as presence. Her intuition is razor sharp. Her energy now serves as a gatekeeper. She senses what lacks depth before it even reaches her, and she walks away without hesitation, without apology. Her transformation isn't surface level, it's archetype. She's tapped into something ancient, a long-buried memory, that women were not born to serve, but to express, not to be molded, but to overflow. And in reclaiming that truth, something primal awakened in her, a wild woman, intuitive, emotionally sovereign, a woman who may be alone, but is never lost. She walks in communion with something greater, her own becoming, and no matter how often they try to reduce her with labels, cold, difficult, distant, none of it sticks, because she no longer exists to be understood. She lives to be whole. She doesn't seek attention. She radiates presence. She's not waiting to be chosen. She does the choosing, and that shift in power confuses those who still try to control the feminine. But she's not in that game anymore. She's already crossed the threshold. And on the other side, she discovered a truth. The real relationship begins only after you've loved yourself so completely that you no longer need anyone. There is something sacred about the way she moves through the world. She doesn't seek applause. She doesn't crave validation. Her confidence lives in stillness. And it's in that silence her true power resides. Carl Jung once said, "What we do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate." And maybe that's why, in choosing herself again and again, she has rewritten her fate. Not with noise, but with clarity. She no longer tries to fill her voids with borrowed promises. She doesn't plead to be loved. She doesn't beg for space in anyone's life, because she's learned that true presence should never be begged for. It should be invited, and when that invitation doesn't come with honesty, She simply declines, not in anger, not in bitterness, but with the quiet dignity of a woman who's been lost enough times to never let the same wound open again. What few truly understand is this. She still longs for love. She still wants to be held, to be seen, to be chosen, but she wants it without losing herself. She spent too long shrinking, trying to squeeze into molds far too small for the vastness of the soul she carries. Now she only offers herself where there is space to be whole. And that kind of love, it requires more than romance. It demands awareness. It asks that both people have met their own shadow and still choose to love. She's not looking for fairy tales. She's looking for a soul alliance. A connection where neither dominates nor submits. Where two people rise side by side, without dimming their colors, without silencing their wounds, without shrinking their dreams. And if that seems like too much for some, so be it. She'd rather wait than survive on emotional crumbs. To many that sounds like arrogance. But it's not. It's self-love in its most sacred form. We are witnessing the rise of a new archetype. A woman who has turned her back on the shallow, who's dived headfirst into the depths. She got tired of being desired, and chose instead to be respected. She chose solitude, not because she gave up on love, but because she finally understood. Real love never requires self-erasure. And when a woman understands this, her whole world begins to shift. She doesn't need to raise her voice to be heard. Her presence speaks for her. Before she even enters a room, the atmosphere changes. Something realigns. Softly, powerfully, undeniably. This isn't mysticism. It's energy. It's the quiet gravity of someone who has faced her deepest wars and returned in peace. Not because she conquered every fear, but because she learned to live with them without being defeated. Carl Jung would say, she found wholeness, not by denying her opposites, but by integrating them. She doesn't reject love. She simply no longer submits to the kind that costs her her essence. She longs to love, but in a love where she doesn't have to edit herself, a love where she can be both shadow and light, both laughter and tears, silence and storm. Because she has learned, anyone who only loves the pretty parts has not yet understood love. And anyone who demands constant sweetness still fears the bitterness that's often essential for growth. She is too whole to settle for halves, too free to accept cages, disguised as care, too sensitive to endure what is shallow. And yet she is strong enough to keep walking this path anyway. Even when it hurts, even when it's lonely, even when it's deeply misunderstood. That is the path of the awakened soul. Choosing silence over noise, depth over validation, truth over comfort. Because deep down, the world fears women like her, women who don't need, who don't bow, who don't let themselves be molded. She disrupts the quiet contracts, the ones never written but always enforced, the ones that say a woman is only whole if she's with someone. But she broke those contracts. She rewrote her narrative. And in doing so she became dangerous, not with rage, but with her clarity. She continues sometimes with tears in her eyes, sometimes with her chin held high, but always, always with her feet rooted in her truth. Because now she knows, she's not alone, she is with herself. And after everything she's survived, that is more than enough. The love that comes after this won't be salvation. It will be celebration. It won't arrive to complete her. It will come to overflow with her. And yes, when a woman chooses to walk alone, the world rushes to warn her, to shame her, to tell her she's making a mistake. But something quiet inside her says otherwise. It's not pride. It's not rebellion. It's a sacred knowing, a wisdom carved from silence. Carl Jung called it individuation. Becoming wholly who you are, no masks, no compromise. And when that happens, Nothing outside of her holds more power than the truth within her chest. And that truth, it doesn't need to prove itself. It shows in the way she closes doors without resentment, in how she steps back when the air no longer nourishes her, in how she smiles, peaceful, even when no one stands beside her. Because now she knows, being alone is not a punishment. It's a vow of loyalty to her soul, and the soul of an awakened woman does not submit, does not dim, does not beg. It simply is, and that is enough. The world will keep trying to convince her she's missing something. It will keep offering distractions, plastic princes, love styled for display, but she's already seen behind the curtain. She's already learned. It's not about finding someone, it's about never losing herself again. And when that realization takes root, everything changes. Desire becomes discernment, lack becomes choice, waiting becomes a path. What once hurt now teaches, what once bound now sets free. You can feel it, can't you? That deep stirring, that quiet, ancient spark. Maybe it's a memory, maybe a wound, maybe the image of a woman you once knew, or maybe it's the woman you're becoming, or the woman you've become. In either case, something within you is asking to be seen more clearly, something that no longer fits inside old mold, something that, if you let it, could transform everything. How you relate to love, to others, and most importantly, to yourself. The woman who lives alone is not just someone who doesn't fit society's story. She is a living symbol of emotional freedom, a quiet revolution, a reminder that it's possible to rebuild without hurry, without fear, without needing to prove anything to anyone. She doesn't walk ahead of others, but she doesn't follow either. She walks her own path, unique, inviolate, and hers alone. And along the way, she lights small fires for those waking up too. So if something inside you stirred from this story, maybe it's because, deep down, you are ready for a new kind of love. A love that begins with a reconciliation, not with another, but with yourself. A love that feeds on silence, presence, and truth. A love that can't be negotiated, begged for, or disguised. And if that love hasn't come yet, maybe it's because you first needed to become the woman who no longer accepts less than she deserves. And if these words found you at the right moment, or awakened a woman you forgot was still living inside you, then let it stay with you. Let it settle. Let it breathe. But don't keep it to yourself. Share this message. Pass it on to another woman who needs to remember her own strength. Like it, comment, subscribe, not out of impulse, but out of choice. Because when something touches the soul, the least we can do is let it keep resonating within us and through us.